Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development, and it's a privilege to have with us Chris Mena, who is a consultant in climate change, emergency management, resilience. Great to have you with us, Chris.
Thank you much, Craig, for the invitation. Very happy to be here.
You've got a great profile and you've done so many things in responding to emergencies and disaster prevention, crisis management. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you came to be doing what you're doing?
Well, I'm Chilean. I've worked around the world in disaster management. So I was part of the World Bank team in Central Asia, Europe, and the Caribbean. I also worked in the public sector as the deputy director of the National Emergency Office of Chile. I also worked in the gas industry, and I have a bachelor's in political science and a master's in risk resilience and disasters in UCL in London. And the funny thing, it's to be really honest, the way that I came up here is first when I left school, I wanted to be a priest. That led me to sort of a mystical path. Wow. And in some point, I realized that priesthood wasn't my thing. So I became a firefighter. In Chile, there are no paid firefighters. We are all volunteers. So I've been a volunteer firefighter for almost 20 years. And in some point, I started realizing, like, okay, how do I put together my career, political science, with this sort of emergency response, etc. experience I had as a firefighter? And in some magic way, these two things came up, and I started to work on disaster risk management. So that's been for the last sort of 10 years.
Amazing. What was your first experience in emergency response?
My first call as a firefighter, I think it was probably was like a suicide attempt. That was sort of my first call. I was also part of the USAR Team of Chile, so I went also to the 2010 Haiti earthquake. So I was doing rescue also there. So there's been a lot of on-the-ground experience, and sort of mixing that with also sort of the political, the more sort of strategic side. It's also been an interesting experience on how to connect with the ground, but also knowing how things go on sort of the top layer also.
People often come into emergency management through volunteering, like you've said, like being in the fire service. And they have different backgrounds, but different degrees, different disciplines that they've studied. How has your political degree helped you in your career?
I think basically first, when we understand that disasters are not natural, that again, it's due to social, to political decisions that we make, it provides you a more sort of a systemic view of the issue. So it's not just sort of responding or with all due respect to engineering, but sometimes it's like, let's make this thing stronger, or let's just build a wall, etc. The politics, in a way, gives you a more sort of a broader sense of the phenomena, in a way, of a social phenomena. And also, particularly in my career, it has also given me the opportunity to have better tools to communicate, to communicate effectively as politicians. They know how to sort of talk and sort of how to share the message in an effective way, and understanding that there's someone on the other side, and you have to convey a message in a way. And that's, for me, has been sort of a key part of my career, of sort of being an advocate, an activist on reducing risk. I'm an active member of the No Natural Disasters campaign, because and again, I think that's part of the tools that this kind of social sciences background provides.
So you've consulted in your past with the World Bank and now the World Food Program, and these are really large organizations. Tell us about your experiences working with them.
It's amazing. It's a challenging scenario because you face different cultural contexts, different institutional contexts. That sort of the resolution, you sometimes get into very specific projects, and sometimes you get into more like larger And that's the challenging part of it, but also it's the beauty of it, because also you are always being challenged, always sort of, it's not sort of a monotone work. It's something that actually, and for instance, for the World Bank, I had projects in Central Asia, former Soviet Union countries with one context, cultural context, and then you move to the Caribbean, completely different context, and then you go back to Greece, and there's another context, and that's sort of it's really interesting. It's really interesting to sort of understanding how in a way how the world works, and to know that there's no one size fits all solution, and that's really important. I think that particularly as a consultant, but I think that particularly on the humanitarian sphere, that there's sometimes the temptation of trying to find this one-size-fits-all solutions, and the reality is that that's impossible. Like each project, each community, each country has their own challenges or their own contexts, and you have to work with them. So yeah.
So this is no one size fits all solution. That's a great understanding for emergency managers to have. So from those organizations, or as your role as the Deputy National Director for the Chilean National Emergency Office, can you talk us through some of the experiences that you've been involved in with disasters or emergencies?
Well, first, I think if we go first to sort of the preparedness phase of mitigation phase, one thing that we realized in Chile, it's a very, as you might know, a very long country with a different geographical and cultural contexts, which pushed us to create regional platforms for reducing risk. So instead of having just like a national structure, we wanted to go into more regional, because we wanted to produce policies that actually were contextualized on the geographical and the social context of each region. So that's something that we really sort of understood from the beginning. That was sort of what I wanted to put in my stay there. And on response, it's the same. We have in Chile we have 90 active volcanoes. Around 2,000 volcanoes as total, but at least 90 that are monitored and actively monitored. And so you have volcanoes in one side, on the other side you have tsunami risk, in between you have wildfires, floodings, industrial events. So it's a very hazard-prone country. And that again, that really challenges this concept of one size fits all, because it's really impossible. Even though we have a multi-hazard approach, and we usually talk about a multi-hazard approach, but in this kind of scenarios, when you have several very clear identified hazards, it's sometimes necessary to have a more specific hazard approach, because of the context anyway. So that sort of tension between having an overall view, but also considering they have specific hazards in the territory, it's challenging in a way.
Did you have to deal with the volcanic eruption?
Yes, well, actually, because I was a deputy, I also sometimes became the acting director, and unfortunately, every time that I assumed as a director, something happened in a volcano. So that was sort of my that's only sort of the volcano god. But yes, we had several activations. 3 or 4 nowadays. I think Chile has like 3 or 4 volcanic eruptions ongoing in yellow or orange alerts. And that's besides the other 90 volcanoes that are monitored or that are actively they're active. So it's a fun country to work on emergency management.
So what sort of different agencies did you work with and communicate with in that role?
Well, in Chile, the model is that the National Emergency Office, it's the coordinator of a system. Nowadays, it's called the Disaster Prevention Response System. And so its role, it's just to coordinate. So it doesn't have any response capacities by itself. So we coordinate the response. So for instance, we coordinate the firefighters, military for response, etc. Besides the technical agencies that monitor hazards, so we have, for instance, if we come back to volcanoes, we have the National Geological and Mining Service that monitors volcanoes and mining accidents. The Navy monitors tsunamis, and so the overall work of the National Emergency Office is to coordinate this system of get all the information and start moving resources to where it's needed when we talk about response.
So what did you find were some of your bigger challenges in the roles that you've held so far?
For me, it's communication. I think that's the key problem that I always see, and it's communication mixed with management. I would say, in a way, with management tools in a way. Why? Because the ones that we've worked in disaster management, we probably know that sort of the wish list on how to reduce risk, etc. It's written probably 30, 40 years ago. Like, we know sort of what we have to do to reduce risk. But somehow we're still seeing that disasters keep on going, keep on happening. And this is my theory, it's my personal view, is that I think that the problem is that most of the people that work in this, they come from more a theoretical approach or more of sort of what we have to do, but not too much experience on how to make things happen. This may happen maybe with management, with influencing on politics. I think that's something that when I did my master's, my thesis was about policy change. And what I've seen is that there's a lot of ways of changing policy, but that requires sort of a sensitivity on how to influence on the agenda, on policy, and that's where I think there's the big gap that we don't have what the theory calls the policy entrepreneurs. There are people that actually can couple the solutions with the problems and put them in the policy stream. And that's something that I think that comes a lot with communication, with having proper communication to try to convene the message to policymakers, for instance, that they really don't care about the theory or about the overall view. They want numbers. They want how much dollars this will cost, how will be the return of that investment, etc. So there's sort of another way of communicating that probably is not the regular way that we disaster managers communicate on our environment. So I think that for me, it's sort of what I've seen as a major challenge in my experience.
So there's multiple different communication activities there. There's the strategic, there's the operational and managing, there's the policy conversations that need to happen. How can someone really prepare for that? What would you say people should train or experience to prepare themselves for those different types of communication?
So first, I think it's to have some basic effective communications tools, like knowing that there's someone else on the other side when you talk. And that means that there's a lot of need for empathy, for understanding that people have biases. That comes from tactical approach, so from very operational work up until policy. When we know that one of the things that I sort of interested in the last years is about behavioral science, and sort of understanding that we as human beings have certain biases, we have certain ways that our brain works in a way that makes us take certain decisions in a certain way. And again, learning that and being aware of that, I think it's something that, again, is transversal. If you talk to a politician or you talk to a firefighter on the ground, you still have to know that there's someone on the other side that has biases, that has a certain context, and you have to try to connect with that.
That's good.
That's
you said
really
empathy.
Empathy, I think it's key.
Okay. I notice also that you're involved in climate change adaptation. Tell us about what you're doing in that area.
Yes, well, I'm part of the Climate Leadership Corps, so it's part of a foundation that's led by Al Gore, who was the former vice president of the U.S. And my role, what I'm trying to push, is mainly on raise the importance of adaptation. So for the last years, probably we've been talking a lot about mitigation, how to reduce the emissions,
Yes.
but sort of the adaptation side was sort of not in the main stream in a way. Now with the last COP, it seems that now we're realizing, okay, we have extreme weather events that are fueled by the climate crisis, and it seems that it's necessary for us to adapt. So now it's sort of becoming an issue. But what I'm trying to sort of push is, okay, let's work on adaptation, but let's not blame climate change for everything. And also, let's understand again that disasters are not natural. So even if we have extreme weather events, there's still things that we can do to reduce the vulnerability for communities, to avoid creating new risk, planning better the territory, etc. So there are things that we can still do. So it's not sort of, okay, everything is lost and the apocalypse is coming. I think that there's a lot of that we can do, and that comes with actual understanding that, again, that there are not natural disasters and that we can have action on that.
That terminology, there are no natural disasters. Can you dig a little bit deeper? Tell us some more about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not something that's just semantics. I think that when we talk about sort of how we compose disaster risk, if we talk about the three main elements, so we talk about there's a hazard that interacts with a certain community that has certain vulnerability traits, and that community probably it's located in a place that it's exposed or not exposed to a certain hazard. So if we know that we can't avoid, for instance, an earthquake. We can't avoid that the earth shakes, so we can't do too much with the hazard. But we can choose where to build. So we can choose exposure. We can choose if we put a community on a landslide-prone area. But also, we know that the most vulnerable people are the ones that usually are more affected. For instance, you have disabled people, people with hearing impairments. And we have tsunami sirens. Those people won't hear the tsunami siren. So if that person dies, it's because of nature, or it's because we didn't consider that person, and we didn't produce a policy that includes that person and makes them aware of the tsunami, for instance. Or there's some studies in Bangladesh that they say that for every man that dies in a flooding, 4 women die. So we talk about, like, why is that? It's chance, or it's because there are gender gaps in the community that and some cultural biases or contexts that take that this figure happens, that there's a 4 times chance of dying being a woman in Bangladesh instead of a man. So again, the nature, it's not the one to blame. I think that it's mainly is us of ownership, of owning that we can do the things. Actually, today on the morning I was also talking about the same thing, and now as someone asked about earthquakes, and I said, okay, let's take this example just briefly. In 2010, we had 2 major earthquakes in the world. So we had Haiti, 6.9 earthquake, which killed almost 250,000 people. And a month after, in Chile, we had an 8.4 earthquake, which killed roughly 500 people. So it's a completely different magnitude of energy that was released. So it's a very small earthquake in Haiti compared to Chile in energy, but the deaths are completely inversed in a way.
Yes.
So why did this happen? Because there are no building codes in Haiti. There's a paper very interesting about corruption and how corruption kills. So again, is this nature? No, it's social. It's political. So again, it's important that we challenge this semantic of sort of blaming the nature, which is, of course, it's easier. It sort of avoids taking the responsibility. But I think that the invitation is to own this and to own that we can influence this.
The removing the barriers, it's about equity, isn't it? The equity of not just opportunity, but the equity of outcome for people. And so if you have a hazard, you have a location, and you have a community, who ultimately gets to decide, no, you can't live there because that's the hazard that's going to hurt you, even though culturally, religiously, history wise, tradition wise, it says you should live there. Who gets to come in and say, no, you have to move?
My approach is that no one. I think that the role of government, particularly in that case, probably is sort of the one that regulates sort of the is to provide information as clear as possible, and to understand that there's cultural context, that there's cultural heritage. There's another beautiful example in Chile in the 2010 earthquake. Most of the people that died because of the tsunami that came after the earthquake, with wave heights in some parts higher than 30 meters. So a massive tsunami. And in the region where most of the people died, there was a small town that's called Tirua, and where no one died. And the reason why people died in the tsunami was mainly because the National Emergency Office had problems with early warning, so they didn't alert the community about the tsunami. So there was like a sort of a case study, like what happened here that this community saved, and they went to the traditional knowledge, and there was some methodology, some mythology of that indigenous community that lived there, that they knew that there were two snakes, one in the sea and one in the ground, and they were brothers and they were fighting. So when they fight, you have to go to the upper land to save from the snake that comes from the sea. So without any technology, without any early warning system, etc., you have a community that knows what to do in case of a disaster. So should we just forbid them to build there because there's a hazardous area? Or we should give them information, make them take their own decisions, and try to provide as best solutions to that. And of course, there are some things that, of course, we won't build. So one thing that I always say is, okay, I won't build a hospital on the front of a tsunami zone, but probably there's some infrastructure that can be put in more disaster-prone areas, with the assumption that we are having proper early warning, that we're having a proper emergency plan, etc. So that the people that are working there, etc., they can save themselves. So it's not just sort of let them go by themselves, but again, I think that it's also respecting the traditional knowledge, the cultural background, the history, as you say, and that's because I don't think it's so linear. Sort of the approach of there's a hazardous area, you have to leave. I think it's a much more complex process that sometimes can lead to people actually wanting to stay there. And I've seen it a lot of times that people sort of build back every now and then on the same place, etc. And it's because they have the livelihoods there, etc. So
yes,
it's
very complex.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been really interesting. And I just want you to know that I was making notes, and I hope our students were making notes. I've got a whole page of notes myself. Chris, if someone wanted to do the work that you do, particularly consulting and climate change adaptation, looking at disaster prevention and response, they're aspiring to do this as part of their career, then what would you say are some key preparations that they would need to do to be highly effective in this career?
Well, I think first on the more sort of hard skills, I think that's having learning at least 2 or 3 languages. That's a sort of something that probably, if you want to work in an international environment, you need to have at least 2 very fluent languages, and probably a third one or fourth that can sort of help you to go around in some cases. Also getting a master's, probably that's sort of a basic thing that you won't have that job if you don't have at least a master's. And the soft skills, I think that's really important to have networking skills, of actually don't being afraid to contact people, to share your abilities, building your network. That's crucial because, of course, sometimes the jobs are published, but most of the times the jobs come from networks that someone that needs a certain project, etc. Nowadays, I'm working on a mining project, and the way that they reached me was because one alumni from my master's knew that I was in Chile and wrote me and was like, okay, let's see, and that was it. So again, it's don't being afraid of building networks,
Great.
of sharing your experience, and finally have a perfect LinkedIn profile. I think that's something that nowadays all people will look at your LinkedIn profile. So that's something that has to be really, really polished and really sort of brand yourself.
That's good. I'm just making a note to myself to add that to our curriculum about LinkedIn profile preparation. That's a very, very good point.
Yeah. When I did my master's in UCL, I took a specific course about how to sort of make the LinkedIn, and in that time, they were saying that LinkedIn was going to be sort of the recruitment tool. So again, it's important that your students have a proper way of having that profile really perfect.
Chris, this has been really good. And I must say that after doing this for a year and a half, interviewing emergency managers and wonderful people like you make a difference. I don't think anyone else has said about being multilingual and having more than one language. So that's a really good new piece of learning and advice to hear. So Chris, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you being with us. I know you're really busy. So thank you for sharing your experiences and your learnings.
No, thank you much, Craig. And anytime, happy to join you.
Thank you. And as Chris said, everybody, if you're watching this, whether you're one of our students, I hope that you've got your notebook and you've got your pen and you've been making notes. If not, hit rewind, replay, and watch again to make some notes. And also, if you are not one of our students, but you're an emergency manager, like Chris said, maybe you don't have your bachelor degree or your master's degree, and that really can open doors up for you. If you don't have that, do reach out to us, uard.ac.nz or uard.org. We will recognize all the experience, the training, the recognition of prior learning is a big part of what we do. It was why we were founded, and it's how we connect with emergency managers to make sure that your career, your experiences is all recognized. If you're like most emergency managers, you have that big binder of training and certifications that you've done in your career, but maybe it doesn't link directly to an academic qualification. We can do that for you. So do reach out to us. We'd love to partner with you to increase your career opportunities. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone else. We'll see you on the next one.